we have the pleasure and honour of having Louis Theroux here for a fireside chat with Richard Eyre. But Mr. Eyre, we generally stitch you up with something quite uncomfortable for him to do, but he's a fantastic interviewer, and interviewing an interviewer could hopefully be quite interesting. Louis Theroux's a TV presenter, a broadcaster, an interviewer, has had the fortune of meeting Jimmy Savile, Paul Daniels, spending his time in the world's toughest prisons. I'm sure many of you have seen the programmes in the last couple of weeks around autism and dementia, which have been fantastic. So I'd like to welcome to stage Louis Theroux and Richard Eyre.
Louis, welcome. So this is the terrifying part where I get to interview the professional interviewer. I have, of course, been spending a lot of time with Louis' documentaries, so I've kind of learned his technique. So there'll be quite a lot of kind of meaningful silences from me, where he then kind of falls into the trap and says what he was really trying not to say all along. So Louis, what do you like with technology?
Probably not the ideal place to be saying this, but I'm reasonably technophobic. I'm not actually, I'm what you might call a late adopter. I'm someone who, even in the late 80s, was just getting his head around VHSs, then was sticking with vinyl long after CDs were introduced, didn't have a mobile phone until 2001, 2002, and got my first smartphone probably 2 or 3 years ago. And actually, I think perhaps, you know, as a sort of one-man focus group, among this sea of, if I can use the term, geeks, non-judgmentally, you know, that I provide an interesting test case for someone who's sort of a recent convert to smartphones, the iPhone, Twitter, things like this.
So iPhone, not Android.
iPhone, yes, I'm a long-time sort of Apple loyalist.
Yes.
I early on, my brother, in the late 80s, my brother got an Apple Mac, and that first, I don't know how many people here are old enough to, but the first time that the Mac kind of came home and you sort of saw a screen light up, but you didn't see text, you saw icons, and you saw this thing called a mouse. This would be sort of 88, I think, 88 or 89. It was a very strange, it was quite shocking.
Still at school.
You were at
school,
yeah. Of course you were. It was a strange thing, but I remember, and once I got my head around that, and I kind of stuck with it. You know, it was an interesting case of brand loyalty through the years. So I'm an iPhone person hitherto. Yes, I like the iPhone.
Yeah, well, we noticed that in your, we've seen the iPhone appear sort of on screen from time to time. In Extreme Love, when you were dealing with those very autistic children, you were trying to get one of them interested in Peppa Pig. That didn't work.
That's right.
They did it.
It didn't work very well. Well,
no.
because they hadn't heard of Peppa Pig, so it didn't have that instant, you know...
It's a good try.
One of the great things I've had with the iPhone is that having small kids, it does sort of buy you 20 minutes at key moments, you know, that actually, if a tantrum is kicking off, or you're in a car, or the iPhone or the iPad works just as well.
Yeah, and there was that very touching moment when you, in the show about Alzheimer's, where you were babysitting that lovely lady for the day. Was it Nancy?
Yes.
Which is wonderful. I do urge people to see it. And there's this lovely moment where Nancy falls asleep on Louis' shoulder. And if you're looking carefully, you can just see that in his lap there's the iPhone and he's doing Angry Birds or something. Is that right? Or
I think it was Tiny Wings, but the point is taken.
So now, how do you, as a professional now, how does this technology affect you? You know, we heard earlier today from somebody from the FT how the journalist is now expected to engage with their audience really at all times. There's no such thing as the news deadline anymore. And is that so for you, that you're kind of on all the time?
I come from a kind of a background where I had thought initially, I was quite precious about making any kind of forays into the public realm, into the celebrity realm, outside of my shows. I felt it was important that when I come into the public, it was via the medium of my documentaries, that I could control those, and that was what I was about. And so I resisted going even on chat shows. I've never really been on a panel show. I tend to be very careful. I don't do many interviews except to let people know when a show is on. And even then, I resist talking about my private life. And I was the same way for a long time about sort of the new media, and in particular Twitter. I thought that actually, why would you break that barrier of mystique? Why not continue to hide behind the curtain?
So no, I'm a celebrity for you then.
I was asked to go on. I think it was the first Celebrity Big Brother, and I'm flesh and blood. I get tempted by the idea of being on these things like anyone would. I think so you kick it around, but actually no. I would never say never, but it's not really. It doesn't really appeal to me when I think about it long and hard. And so I felt the same way about Twitter for a long time. And in fact, maybe I wouldn't even have caved in, except I found out that there were people out there pretending to be me. And in fact, people would come up and say, really, I follow you on Twitter. It's great to meet you in person. And I thought, well, that's odd because I'm not on Twitter. And then people I worked with who were on Twitter sort of said, there's these annoying people who were tweeting as you. And at least one of them, I won't say he was semi-literate, but his punctuation was really odd. He capitalized all his nouns. And his tweets were just bizarre. He would tweet, one of his tweets was, just finished watching the Alan Titchmarsh show, the best hour of telly, outside of my own documentaries, of course. and it was all capitalized. And I just thought, it's so inane, and it's just nothing against Alan Titchmarsh, but it's just, I've never actually seen the Alan Titchmarsh show, and it just seemed like, well. And then there was another guy who, and to be fair, the capitalization guy only had about 10,000 followers, but there was another guy who had about 100,000 followers, and he was tweeting a lot of stuff that I had no idea what he was talking about, and I thought, well, it doesn't do me any good cultivating a mystique and remaining Oz-like behind the curtain if there's these numpties out there kind of pretending to be me, and to one sense of being me. Yeah. So I thought I'd better get in on the Louis Theroux business. It's obviously a growth industry.
I think I'm following you. I may be following one of the other guys. I don't
know. The other guys, I follow them as well, and they've gone quiet since there was a little bit of an awkward face-off. Like this town ain't big enough for the both of us. I thought I was being quite magnanimous. Because I didn't get too funny about it. I just said, I'm going to tweet as me as well. Hope that's okay. But then, for some reason, like my girlfriend is more protective, of me in a way than I am of myself, which, was one of the things I love about her. But she did something a bit naughty, which was I had my Twitter account open on the laptop, and she logged in and sent a semi-abusive direct message to the guy saying, like, stop pretending you're me, you're not me, you're a loser, or something like that. It's totally out of character. And I said, like, Nancy, you can't, that's not cool, you can't go on. Now now I've got another imposter, This one's inside the house.
Inside the house. So have you ever drunk tweeted?
I'm ashamed to say that well, if I could talk a moment about what I like about, because having done it just to sort of get rid of the fake me's and sort of by displacing them, I then sort of developed a bit of a taste for it. And what I realized was, whereas there's a kind of, I'd resisted doing sort of panel shows and other kinds of media where I felt that either it seemed self-regarding, like, look at me, I deserve to be on TV, even when I'm not actually doing my job, or look at me and I'm just going to promote my product in a slightly tedious way. I felt with Twitter there was a kind of authenticity about, what I like about it is that it is unpretentious. It actually cuts through the celebrity miasma. It's completely unmediated. So I enjoyed sort of tweeting about banal things, to do with, I bought this weird liqueur. I'm going to tweet a picture of myself, trying the liqueur and let you know what it tastes like. And then just like ongoing little narratives that you could get going. And I enjoyed all that. But then, of course, once you've had a bit of the liqueur and then you've had a bit more, then you find that you're still tweeting and you're slightly drunk. And then it's the whole private-public thing gets dissolved. So you sort of think like, it's just like texting your mates. But then if you've got 100,000 followers, actually, you realise this is dangerous. You could say something embarrassing. And so I began sending ones that were more and more silly as I got more and more drunk. And then someone tweeted back saying,
your tweets are almost as boring as your programs. You wanker, or something like that. And then I had a little flash of anger, which I think in my normal, sort of non-drunk self, I would have been well able to kind of suppress. But being drunk, I just tweeted back, if I'm so boring, why have I got 100,000 followers and you've only got 50? Send. And then I thought, I think that was all right. And then I got a tweet, a frantic direct message from Nancy, my girlfriend, who evidently follows me around the clock, because she wasn't even in the house at that time.
That's a lovely thing.
She direct messaged like, "What are you doing? That's nuts. Don't rise to it, Louis. The whole point is you're a celebrity and they're not, and you've alienated your entire fan base by saying that." Yeah. And so I immediately thought, fuck, she's right. And I deleted the tweet and said, at Rupert Murdoch has hacked into my account. I've just found out he's been sending abusive tweets. Please disregard.
Which can affect the best of us, like Giles Corran, you were telling me this week.
Well, Giles Corran, I don't know how many saw this week, Giles Corran received a message saying, from a young journalist saying, your column this week about your children was totally lame. It was one step up from a blog post on Mumsnet. And he tweeted back, "Go fuck yourself, you barren old hag." And so this has sort of divided the Twitter sphere. Well, on the one hand, she was being provocative and critical. On the other hand, he did say, "Go fuck yourself, you barren old hag." So the rights and wrongs of this are being debated.
Yeah. So with that,
but I think he's unapologetic. I don't think he was drunk, and I don't think he's apologised.
No.
I mean, I tend to think, try and take the high road. I got another one saying, it was on Boxing Day, and it said something like, I tweeted something about Game of Thrones, which I'd watched 5 episodes of, and I thought was, apologies to anyone who's a big fan. I like the Lord of the Rings and elves and goblins as much as the next man. In fact, more probably than the next man. But I've been kind of disappointed, and I said, it's kind of like a cross between the Lord of the Rings and Knots Landing. It has this sort of soap opera quality, and someone, a fan of Game of Thrones, tweeted back, "Keep your stupid fucking opinions to yourself, you celebrity cunt." And I remember I was bathing the kids. It was like 6 in the... I thought, "Oh, I love your documentaries. Wow, you're great, Louis. Keep me. When's your next documentary?" I was like, "You celebrity cunt." And the strange thing about negative, it's like they say about reviews, the bad ones hurt and the good ones don't help. It's like the one nasty tweet, and I found myself sort of fixating on it. It's like, what do I say? What do I say? Anyway, I just tweeted back, "And a Merry Christmas to you too."
Very good, very good. But there's a part of you that sort of feels that this sort of freedom of speech is not a terribly bad thing. When you were saying that the guy who tweeted about Fabrice Muamba and got...
I was shocked. I was shocked that the guy got sent to prison, because I sort of feel that his tweets were racist. It's not actually illegal to be a racist. It's not actually illegal to have offensive opinions. That's what freedom of speech is. We don't have freedom of speech to protect opinions we agree with. It's to protect opinions we don't agree with. Right. And so I sort of thought actually a custodial sentence over something like that was overboard. Yeah. And I sort of tend to feel that that we need to sort of let a million flowers bloom, and let, the antidote to offensive speech is more speech. Not actually making martyrs out of idiots.
Yeah, very interesting point. I mean, but also, the trolling thing, that whenever there's an article, there's a chance to comment afterwards, and that does bring out the worst in people. So your view is you just rise over that.
I definitely feel... I understand why people get upset by it, but I sort of feel that actually you've got to, if once you start censoring people's speech, unless it's actually a threat, a terrorist threat or an incitement to attack someone, or as they say, you cry fire in a crowded theatre, if it's just an opinion, then...
Yeah. When we talked earlier on, you described being on Twitter as being a bit like in the school common room.
Yes.
You know, with sort of lots of voices. Do you still see it that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I've enjoyed about Twitter is that actually when there is a big event going on, you know, it's a sense of the community that exists, that it gets together and you get this cacophony of different jokes. I went to a boarding school, and after school it was, you'd crowd into the TV room and you'd sit round and you'd watch whatever it was, Star Trek or Wogan, or, and people would shout out comments. And, you know, and the big kudos was if you shouted out something that was laughed at, or if you said something lame, everyone would jump on you and then they'd get a laugh off you. But it was this sense of this sort of healthy competition to do with who could get off a good, you know, cracker. And so I sort of see the Twitter sphere as being comparable in a way. And that's one of the things that I've enjoyed about it. And you can sort of opt in and not. And recently, you know, when there's event telly that's on, something like, well, can I say one of my own shows? No, that's immodest. No,
yes,
but if there was something like 56 Up was on this week, which was about, you know, the Michael Apted documentary, and it felt as though this is a landmark TV series, and then there's this very affecting character called Neil Hughes.
Yeah, the Lib Dem guy. Is that him?
He wasn't. Oh yes, sorry, the Lib Dem. I thought you were talking about Chris.
No.
You're absolutely right,
Yeah.
Neil Hughes, and he's a Lib Dem councillor. For some reason, that's not the first thing I think of.
No, I understand why.
But he's a very damaged. He's a very damaged individual who'd sort of been through, I think, a nervous breakdown and various difficult experiences.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those things where you watch the telly, you want to sort of share and sort of saturate in the experience of having seen it. And so I went on Twitter and was saying, like, what's the deal with Neil and where are his parents? They never get interviewed. And it became it was a lot of added value to that whole, that TV moment.
Yeah. I'm going to ask if anybody would like to ask a question of Louis shortly. Before I do, just as a creator of content, this kind of great digital world that we're in now, it's hard for you to kind of control what is happening to your content, and you know, and I can get hold of a lot of what you do free of charge. Does that bother you?
Well, not that much, if I'm honest with you, because I sort of feel that I get paid a healthy salary, and for the moment, it appears that the business model of you know, being paid to make a show, and the revenues that are made through BBC Worldwide and broadcast license fee, that all seems to work. My feeling is that actually, if you want, you know, I pay for the content that I can get, but occasionally it has happened. Is it okay to say this? It has happened that if I can't get a show and I want to see it, and it seems that I can't get it on DVD and I can't find it on iTunes and it's not on iPlayer, then I try and find it wherever I can find it.
Yeah.
And that seems to work. Now, I don't know how long, you know, I don't know. It's like, I'll happily pay, but if I can't get it, I want to get it, I want to watch it. Now, it happens that actually I have a little bit of professional interest in this in another sense, because my most recent documentary, it hasn't gone out yet, it's going out in June, is about the porn industry, and it's about the death of the porn industry. In porn, I don't know how many people are aware of this, porn, probably more than would let on.
About half of the room, probably.
The world of porn has been completely decimated in America. A porn movie has been decimated by the availability of pirated content on YouTube-style sites. So basically, men, I don't know why I'm assuming it's men, whoever it is that's watching it, can go onto a YouTube-style porn site and click on a pirated video, usually cannibalized from an old movie, and watch for 5 minutes or so, and then click onto something else. And they found that no one really pays for porn anymore. And as a result, the number of porn movies has been gone down per month from about 300 or 400 to sort of 10 or 15. And you see in a real world way, this has consequences, that the job of the porn actor sort of is on the fringes of not really existing anymore. And in the same way as porn led the way into VHS, DVDs, and then internet, you know, there's a fear that this will be a harbinger for what is in store for sort of mainstream media. Right. Now, you can debate the merits of whether or not the porn industry should exist, but if it is a bellwether, if it is the indicator of where we are all going, then you have to take it seriously. So what they're doing to adapt is by making the films they do make extremely high-end. So they are trying...
It's one of those unfortunate expressions.
You know, you find out when you talk about porn, like any expression you use seems to take on a double entendre.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I'm used to that. But But so they're trying to make these extremely high-budget films that everyone will want to watch in 3D, many of them. 3D. Imagine porn in 3D. But it doesn't really bear thinking about. And so where that will take them, who's to say? Yeah. But it will. I think what it tells you is that actually, if people don't feel an emotional attachment and a sense of pride about consuming what you produce, then they will opt out. They will just download it illegally. No one wants. You might want to download In Rainbows, the Radiohead album, or you might want to have the Breaking Bad box set on your coffee table. No one wants the Dirty Debutantes 5 box set on their coffee table. So I think it puts an onus on us as producers of content to sort of make things that people feel connected to.
Any questions for Louis? There's one right at the very back. So you first and then...
Oh, I did first. Louis, I'm the Chief Executive of the IAB, so I'm going to ask the first question, but I've just got to. What was it like having Christine Hamilton come on to you, and what's the most scary situation you've been in one of your shows, or are they one and the same thing?
It's a good question. And actually, with when Christine Hamilton, for those of you who didn't see the show, I was with the Hamiltons when they were accused of a rape at a swingers party in Essex, that they were later, believe it or not, found not guilty of. In fact, the charges were never even followed up. They were dropped. But I was inside the house while the media siege continued, and as a way of coping, it was quite stressful. We would get a little bit tipsy sometimes. And so one night, she sort of draped herself over me and said, "It's so silly. Why can't we just flirt with one another? And let people talk, let them talk." And it was sort of... And I wasn't sure quite what it all meant, except that I knew...
The cameras are rolling, are they?
The cameras were rolling, and I could see my director on another... He was also a little bit drunk. He was sitting on a chair, like on the other side of the room, filming away, and I had this strange doubling that you get, especially in moments of heightened reality when you're filming, and half of me was thinking, like, this is extremely weird. I don't quite know what Christine is playing at, and the other half was thinking, actually, this is great, And I almost didn't want to move, because I sort of, in a TV way, wanted it to continue. Yeah. And so that was sort of what was going through my mind. Actually, was it scary? No, I really didn't feel in any way threatened. Another time, I was in the back of the car, and she ran her finger up my leg, and I remember thinking I didn't know if it was scary, but it was strange. And the scariest moment, I think, was when I did a show about skinheads, and it was I'd been told that I needed to go to a skinhead gathering, and there'd be 150 skinheads, and it was a rally, and the BBC got security from Pinkertons, and then the Pinkertons guy said, "We're not going in there without our guns," and they sort of bailed on us, and they kept saying, like, looking at me and saying, "You look kind of Jewish, I think you're going to have a problem." And then I was like, well, we've got to go in there, and my director actually was Jewish, and it was one of the things, like, we just got very revved up about it, and then we went in there, and in the end it went okay, but it was somehow the idea of them all piling in on us made me nervous.
I think the bit that kind of gave me the shivers was that America's most hated family. Yeah. Because that guy was unhinged. He kept calling you a Jack Weasel.
Jack Weasel, yes, he did.
Jack Weasel.
He said I was the most evil man in history. He said, "You're right up there with Pontius Pilate."
That's right, yeah. Yeah, he did.
Which I thought was a great compliment.
Well, not many people have been compared, that's for sure. There was a question right at the back over there. Intriguing criminal gangs in Lagos and neo-Nazis in America and Christine Hamilton.
Yes.
Hi, Louis. I'm curious, now that you've adopted Twitter, when you're making one of your shows, do you tweet about it or do you completely avoid that?
No, okay, that's a really interesting question, because actually that's one of the debates that we have in the office, is to what extent you can tip your hand when you're working on something. So far, when I'm actually in the process of making a show, for access reasons mainly, but also so that I don't let the competition know what I'm working on, I tend to not tweet about what I'm working on. I tweet generally about where I am and other stuff that's going on. Then once the show is wrapped, I'll start tweeting about it. And then when the show goes out, I generally get on Twitter, let people know it's going out, and then I've live tweet. I did a show about America's Most Dangerous Pets, and I live tweeted through that, which I enjoyed doing. But I think, I have to be a little careful that I don't sort of you know, the danger is that with the transparency is that actually when I go into a place sometimes to get access, they may look back and, you know, I got access to this autism school and also a dementia home, and if they go and see like, oh, he's the Weird Weekends guy who got cuddled by Christine Hamilton, we don't want him coming. You know, like there can occasionally be a risk of that sort of stymieing the access. So we have to be a bit careful about that.
Yeah, I love the way you described yourself once as being, you know, me being adrift in their world.
Yes.
Which gives a kind of difference between you and Ali G, who's kind of out there, you know, the kind of just taking the piss out of people who never heard of him and assume that they should do a documentary with this young guy.
Yeah. Well, I really think it's important. And what works best, I think, in the shows is when you feel that I'm sort of at the mercy of the people that I'm among.
Yes.
It's that reversal of power that I think is what works best. Because, you know, I think there's enough smugness on TV as it is. So for me to get on there, you know, and actually be given a hard time, I think is a, you know, valuable contribution.
Yes, it is. Was there a question over here? Did I see somebody where maybe they were just ordering a drink? Is there another question? Yes, please. This lady right down the front here. And then there's somebody just behind you.
Hello, I'm Rachel from Virgin Atlantic. I was going to ask, with America's Most Hated Family, how did they make you feel when you were there? Because you do a fantastic job of not giving anything away on screen. And I think to watch that, I think it was just, and I just wondered how, were they as intimidating as they seemed?
So the America's Most Hated Family was a religious group in Kansas, and they picket the funerals of dead soldiers waving strange placards saying God hates fags and so on. And, you know, in many ways they were the strangest people I've ever been among. And what was strange about, you know, I always say that the weirdest thing about weird people is how normal they are. And you know, because you have someone who's just weird, well, they're just weird. But then when they come at you with, like when I visited a neo-Nazi in Idaho, and then he was like waving swastikas, and then he suddenly announced that he was a huge fan of Benny Hill, and Are You Being Served? And I just thought, well, that is really coming from left field. And what was weird about America's Most Hated Family, so-called, was that they were very educated, and actually, you know, they weren't hillbillies in the least. And they were very urbane and very switched on about things like social media. You know, I don't know if any of you follow them, but they're on Twitter constantly. They're on Facebook constantly, always doing updates, doing funny videos. So when I was with them, the strange thing was that 90% of the time, just being around the house, 90, well, let's say 70%, they'd be very approachable, very nice, warm, likable, and could converse on, you know, different subjects, you know, to do with, I remember one of them was a big fan of the Killers, and, you know, another one was a big fan of the Kooks. And
no, they weren't daft.
They were not daft, but they were also hip and switched on in a strange way.
Yeah.
And so, so what you get is that then when they suddenly turn it on and they're waving the placards and come out with an announcement like, we're going to go and be in Israel in pink caves in 6 months because Jesus is coming back, and then you sort of think it's bizarre. And the other thing that is going on is you get a slight Stockholm syndrome that sets in where you begin to get almost anesthetized or at least desensitized to the opinions that you're hearing. And because they're not physically assaulting people, and because it is, again, it's just placards, not to minimize the hurt that they cause, after a while it starts to seem, if not exactly normal, but the impact is diminished. So you have to sort of try and, you need a reality check occasionally to remind yourself quite how shocking it is.
There's a question just here, please, Anna.
Hello, Louis.
Hello.
I was wondering if you have a dream interviewee, a dream topic, and is anything too controversial off limits for you?
Great
Well,
question.
you know, that's an interesting question. I tend to feel that nothing is too controversial. It's only you have to have the right approach. So I would never be with someone, I'd never want to be with someone in the act of committing a crime that I was very uncomfortable with in any way that I'd seem like I was somehow aiding and abetting what they were doing. You know, so for example, one thing to be with neo-Nazis as they're expressing their opinion, but if they say, come out tonight, we're going to go and round people up and beat them up, we're going to drive around some non-white areas and beat people up, then at that point you say, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to go along for that. Do you know what I mean? I don't know that I want to be there and film. I don't know. You really have to think carefully about what your role is in kind of another strange thing was when I was covering vigilantes in Johannesburg, and one of the vigilantes arrived for filming with a man in the trunk of his car that he'd beaten up, and he was bleeding quite badly. He'd been whipped with a big leather whip called a shambok, and they kind of pulled him out of the car and dragged him out, and I remember thinking, like, okay, now do I interview him or do I call an ambulance? Yeah. Or maybe the police, and I tried to sort of talk to the guy who'd been beaten and see if he needed help and so on. To answer the second part of the question, the subject that's always appealed to me is Scientology. I always felt that is, in terms of the themes that I'm interested in, which are to do with, what do we consider right and wrong, and, to what extent is it okay to, go along with something controversial, these things that help people, but then there's many disgruntled ex-Scientologists. The themes plus the whole celebrity theme I find fascinating. But I made a few approaches, and so far they're not playing ball.
Tom Cruise, he say no so far.
At the moment.
At the moment. Yeah. Well, stick with it. Well, our time has unfortunately gone, and predictably terribly quickly. Louis Theroux, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.